I know. I thought I was done, and I thought I was too. But then I thought sometimes some professors or bar prep or states, they throw this section into sales, and just in case, I'd go over it because it might come up, and if it is, it's like a very small portion, or they might do a play on facts to make you think it's this. And if they do and you have time, you have to pretty much address why it's not and then continue your analysis as we had discussed before. And unfortunately, if that's the case, there could be a good amount of points just sitting there for the taking if you have time to address them. So just in case, let's address it. So the reason this is part of Article 2, first of all, is because if there is a sale of a good, it goes towards UCC Article 2. Okay, so sometimes a lease is a true lease, which means it is what it purports to be. It is a lease. It is exactly what it says, but sometimes it's not an actual lease. It's what we say a disguised sale, because the terms of the lease are such that it's not actually a lease. It's more like a contractual obligation to purchase something. So there's actually 5 steps to determine whether or not, whether a lease is actually a distinguished sale or a lease. Well, the first step is to see if there is an economic life attached to this item in the transaction. If there is, what is it? If the economic life, meaning that you probably think this product is going to last you about 10 years, if that is the economic life, 10 years, and the lease is for 10 years, that kind of goes in favor of it not actually being a lease, but actually more like a disguised sale, right? Because you're literally being contracted to hold on to something for as long as it's usable for. That's not a lease, that's a purchase, right? Because you purchase something, you keep it till it dies, right? Or till it breaks. Now, the second thing to consider is the requirements in the actual lease terms. So this is the terms of the lease. Do the terms of the lease require you to renew the contract? Now, if they do require you to renew the contract, does that requirement of renewal take you to the end of the economic life? So for example, if the economic life is 10 years and the original lease is 5 years, but there's a term in the lease that says you're required to renew at the end of the 5-year period for another 5 years, that means there's a requirement to renew that would allow you to utilize the rest of the remaining life of this product. Therefore, it's less likely to be a lease and more likely to be a forced sale, right? Now the next one is the option to renew. So if at the end of this lease term, you're not required to renew for the remaining life, but you're able to renew if you want. You have the option to renew if you so please. If you have the option to renew if you so please. And that renewal is such an amazing deal. Like, it's so good. No person would pass up the ability to renew this lease for this price. Then it's probably not actually a lease, it's probably a forced sale. Because it's kind of like a trap. It's kind of like saying, even though you typically probably would not have renewed this lease, because it's such an amazing deal, you're like, why would I pass this up? It's become such a good option. It's too good to say no to. It's what do they call it? It's a fairy tale deal. It's too good to be true, so I'm going to take advantage of it. If there is a term that allows you to renew and the terms are just so incredibly favorable to you that no person in their right mind would turn it down because it's just like stupid cheap, dirt cheap, whatever, it's not probably a true lease, because a true lease doesn't do that. It would probably be more like a disguised sale if it did. Next one is if there's an option to own. So there's a lot of leases that allow you the option to own. That's not indicative of a disguised sale necessarily, but it is a factor that can help you weigh, because remember, this is factors. So if these are all like unsure of whether it's a sale or not, this factor can help you kind of decide if it is or not, if you're on the edge, right? Because if you have a lease option to own it, you already had it for so much time and invested so much into it, and it's already such a killer deal, it kind of sounds like they really are pushing you to buy it, right? The next one is the most indicative of what it is, a true lease or a disguised sale. If the person that you got the lease from, the lessor, if the lessor at the end of this lease, when you're done with it, if they get the property or the item or the good back, then it's not a disguised sale, it's likely just a true lease. That's really what it purports to be. But if there is not a lot of information about the lessor receiving it, or it's very unlikely the lessor will ever have this in his possession again, it's very unlikely that this is actually a true lease. It's more likely that it's a disguised sale, because a lease is something that you give somebody for a time period and you get back, right? So if you're not getting it back, it's probably going to be a sale. So these are factor tests. Since there's 5, it's great because you can easily have an outlier there. But I would say for the most part, if it looks like a lease, it smells like a lease, doesn't always mean it's a lease. If it looks like a disguised sale, sounds like a disguised sale, it probably is. But there's a lot of fact patterns where they'll discuss the idea of a lease and its concepts. And then it ends up being that the economic life is, twice as long as you thought, or there's no option to own, or the lessor always gets it back or something, and it ends up just being a sale. But if you can bring this up and point out although this may look like a lease, it's obviously a clear sale. And where this could come in is when you're determining the contract terms and you determine if it's a single transaction or an installment contract. You could throw this in there and be like, additionally, this is also not a lease because of this reason. It is obviously a contract. It's not trying to be a disguised sale. You can throw it in around there if you wanted to, and that would kind of help you solidify more analysis. I guess maybe it's probably better if you do it before you determine if it's an installment contract or single transaction, because you could say, additionally, there's some wording here that make me think that this could be a lease. However, I don't believe it actually is lease. I think it's a contract, and here's why. I don't believe there is any type of distinguished sale here. Here's why. Now remember, the reason this comes up is because somebody is trying to secretly sell you something that you don't actually want and nobody would want, and then you get stuck with something. And so this is kind of like hanky-panky type stuff. But if you bring this up and you say, looks like there's some terms for a lease here, but it's clear this is a contract. In addition to that, even if this was a lease, it would be a disguised sale because of these reasons, whatever, right? Or it wouldn't be because of these reasons. If you have time, you don't have to. Going through all of the reasons is not necessary if there's not that much information about it. But if there is any type of red herring about a lease that is specifically connected to facts that relate to the terminology and the analysis that provide you an answer and conclusion at the end, it might be worth bringing up. Maybe just wait to the end, and if you happen to have time, which nobody ever does, but if you do at the end, you're like, I have an extra 10 minutes, let me type a little bit more. This might be something you can type about. If not, now you understand what it is. Okay, now we're done.